Hey, welcome everyone to FutureCom, and I'm John Kindervag. I'm Senior Vice President at Forrester Research, and I'm best known as the person who created Zero Trust. So guess what we're going to talk about today? The one thing that I know how to talk about, which is Zero Trust. And so today's topic is how you can win the cyber war with Zero Trust. And we're all in a cyber war. We are in the same cyber war. Everyone in the world, right? We are all directly connected to the world's worst malicious actors. The world is actually flat. I know I'm a flat earther, but only because Ethernet made it flat. That connection changes the game. So there's no place to hide out. There are no suburbs on the internet. We all live in the same bad neighborhood. And so if you're in the cybersecurity business, you are a war fighter. We are in a cyber war and you have to fight it. You know, cybersecurity is an adversarial business, and there's only two other adversarial businesses, the military and law enforcement. And so think about that. The importance of your job is just got a whole lot more strategic. So this is where it started, right? I wrote a paper in 2010 called No More Chewy Centers, introducing the Zero Trust model of information security. I spent 8.5 years at Forrester Research. It was a wonderful time. But here's where it is now. In May of last year, the President of the United States, President Biden, issued an executive order telling all federal government agencies that they must adopt best practices in advance towards a zero trust architecture. If you would have told me in 2010 that 11 years later the president was going to issue an executive order on this, I would have told you to get back in your DeLorean, get that thing up to 88 miles an hour and go back to Hill Valley. And I hope that we have some people out there who are old enough to remember what I'm talking about. So a lot of noise about zero trust, and so I'm going to talk about authentic zero trust, what it really is. This is without any vendor spin. This is the original zero trust. I call it authentic zero trust. So zero trust is a strategy designed to stop data breaches and other cyber attacks. You see, we need to understand this word breach. This word breach doesn't mean what we think it means. In cybersecurity, we tend to think, oh, somebody breached, we got breached. I hear often zero trust means assumed breach. No, that's assumed intrusion, right? Somebody getting into our environment, that's going to happen. But an actual data breach, because data is the thing that fuels the modern economy, a data breach, as defined by legal and regulatory entities like PCI or CCPA or GDPR, happens when data that is sensitive or regulated is exfiltrated from our networks or systems into the hands of a malicious actor. So malicious actors will still get in. The question is, can they get the sensitive stuff out? That's what we're going to ask. And then there are other cyber attacks, and you can't stop cyber attacks from happening. Why? Because you aren't the cyber attacker. But what you can do is stop them from being successful. And that is a game-changing paradigm. If you can make that shift in your mind, I can't stop every attack out there. I'm worried about all these attacks, this attack. You can play whack-a-mole all day long. But if you stop them from being successful, that's a different game. And we're going to invert the rules on the attackers with zero trust. So it leverages design principles proven to work for more than a decade, and I'll show you those here in just a moment. It uses a standard 5-step methodology for implementing these architectures, easy to use. I've given you a design model so that you can repeat it over and over and over again and do this incrementally, iteratively, and non-disruptively. You'll hear those three words today probably quite a few times. And then finally, it provides demonstrable positive security outcomes for companies or organizations. I should say organizations. I need to change that, don't I? For companies who adopt zero trust. And I've seen that in the last 10, 11 years myself. There's a reason why that executive order was adopted. You know, we used to joke that zero trust was like Fight Club. The first rule of both were the same. You didn't talk about it. And what President Biden did that I'm so thankful for is he changed the incentive and said it's okay to talk about what you're doing in zero trust. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to do a case study or a speech with somebody and they wanted to do it, but their legal team, their PR team said, no, we can't let anybody know we're doing zero trust. So zero trust is an iceberg, and what you see publicly is the very tip of that iceberg. Now, there's a bunch of zero trust misconceptions, and let me just clear them up for you. First of all, zero trust means making a system trusted. That's false. How much trust should there be in a system? Zero. The problem is trust, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's that word trust that causes a huge amount of problems, and I want to get you to focus in on that today. Secondly, zero trust is about identity. That's false. Zero trust consumes identity. And this is, again, vendors have taken this, and every vendor has tried to make it about products. And they've said zero trust is whatever my product does, right? And of course, I understand that. I mean, that's just human nature. You got to market, and you got to sell. And we're in a capitalist society, so I can give it some level of begrudging respect, but there are no zero trust products. There are products that work well in zero trust environments and products that probably don't work very well. But, just because your product is limited to X doesn't mean zero trust is limited to X either. And then zero trust is complicated. That's false. It's actually very simple. There's only 9 things you need to know about zero trust to do it. Those are the 4 design principles and the 5-step methodology, and I'm going to show those to you in just a moment. But first, we're going to step back and we're going to go into strategic engagement, because what I wanted to do when I was at Forrester is bring strategy into cybersecurity, because it was missing this. So there are 4 levels of strategic engagement. And we look at them first from grand strategy. This is the ultimate goal that any entity is trying to achieve. And in order to understand the grand strategy of your organization, you need to understand who the grand strategic actors are. So in the United States, it's the president. In a company, it's your CEO, your board of directors. You might be in some other type of organization, and you might have a different kind of strategic actor. Or grand strategic actor. Or you might be in a subset of an organization that defines its own grand strategy and has its own grand strategic actors. Whatever it is, you need to define the goal. And this usually comes from a business perspective. Secondly, then we have strategy. Strategy is the big idea to achieve that ultimate goal. Now, after that, we have tactics. Tactics are the things we use, and almost everyone in the world confuses strategy and tactics. They think they're being strategic when really they're being tactical, because they're talking about stuff, things, not ideas. So that would be the distinguishing thing to look for, right? Look for ideas, not things. Things will come and go. Ideas can have a much longer life cycle. And then the 4th level is operations, the way you use the things you have in order to execute on the big idea to achieve that ultimate goal. And if this system is going to work together as a system, these 4 things have to work in unison, harmoniously up and down the stack. That's what we're trying to achieve here today in talking about zero trust. So this maps perfectly to the cyber war that we're in. So the grand strategy is to stop data breaches. I just talked to you about data fueling the modern economy and how breaches equal the exfiltration of that sensitive, or what I call toxic data, meaning the data that is toxic to you if it gets exfiltrated. Even this week, we've had some big data breaches come out in the news. And I could talk a lot about why that's happening, but I think you'll kind of see from the slides to give you some insight to stop it from happening. Then we have strategy. If you want to be strategic in cybersecurity, you must adopt a zero trust mindset, because it is the world's only cybersecurity strategy. Now, I'm going to show you why I can say that in just a moment. And then we have tactics, the tools and techniques we use. Hey, I started out as an engineer. I got in here because I love technology, right? I'm a geek at heart, I guess, or, all those kinds of things. I love it. And I still love it to this day. And I still like to get my hands dirty with the technology. but they don't solve the problems if they aren't working together as a system. And then finally, operations, the platforms and the policy, the way we use it. Again, these four things must work together in unison if we're going to be successful in fighting the cyber war that we're in. And think about the cyber war that we're in today, because in a kinetic war or a physical war, if a nation state launched a missile at a private company, that would not go down well, right? That would be, incredible that anything like that could happen. But that's functionally what happens when you see nation state attackers attack these private companies. Think of them sending a missile at you. I was talking to a retired two-star general a number of years ago, and he sat me down and he said, "John, I've fought my wars. You go out and fight yours." And it was such an inspirational moment for me that I've kept that in the back of my head, that every day I feel like I'm going out trying to fight the war and make the world a little bit better every single day. And you can do that too. You can be part of that as being part of this cybersecurity community that we all have. So let's look at grand strategy, right? Why do I say this? Well, because of the target data breach. This is day zero of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity doesn't exist until the target data breach happened back in 2013, right? So we're now in 2008, right? Or 2022, 8 years ago. See, everything before here, before the target data breach, I call BT, or before target. We're now in the year 880, 8 after target. We just had a birthday over Christmas holidays, right? Because if you remember the target data breach, over Black Friday weekend, 110 million records were stolen, credit card numbers. And this led to the first firing of a CEO over something that IT did or didn't do, which was allow a data breach. The only thing that IT can do to get the CEO fired is to allow the data breach. And if there is a data breach in your organization, you have rules and policies in place that allow it to happen. So this is why it's grand strategic. Boards and CEOs don't want to get fired. And I could go through a long list of CEOs and boards who've been fired over data breaches. And when I talk to board members, they say typically if there is a big data breach, we're going to fire the CEO to protect ourselves from lawsuits and all the things that are incumbent around that. And then there was the Opm data breach. This was so massive. Office of Personnel Management, 22 million people. These weren't 22 million rando people. These are 22 million people with high security clearances. This was the NOC list, non-operational covers list from Mission Impossible 1. If you remember Tom Cruise hanging down in that really highly secure room from his fancy trapeze, he didn't need to do any of that stuff, folks, because that room didn't exist. All he needed was some basic SQL injection hacking skills, and he could have gotten the same data. So the U.S. federal government issued a report in 2016 called the Opm Data Breach, How the Government Jeopardized Our National Security for More Than a Generation. A very interesting report. But this is where everything started. This was the first big fulcrum that started levering zero trust up. Because in that report, the Congress came out and said the OMB should provide guidance to agencies to adopt a zero trust IT security model. And now that's happened. Just a few weeks ago, the Office of Management and Budget issued that guidance and asked that organizations adopt a zero trust model. So zero trust. Why do I say it's the world's only cybersecurity strategy? Well, let's go back and look at what isn't a strategy that we thought was strategic. First of all, we have defense in depth. Now, my friend Rick Holland, who worked with me at Forrester, coined the term expense in depth, and I love that term. Expense in depth. We spend money we don't have on things we don't need because we don't know what to protect in the first place. If it's about spending money and buying enough stuff, you've spent enough money, you've bought enough stuff. But it hasn't been used properly. It's not in the right place. It doesn't have the right policies. It's not architected correctly. And so it's not working. And then we have compliance. One of the congressman who wrote the OMB data breach report, congressman from Texas, Will Hurd, I met with him after that. And he said to me, John, what do you think is the biggest problem that we have in cybersecurity today? And I'm sure he was thinking that I would say threat actors and blah, 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 nation state attacks and 0 days and all of those things. And I said, too many compliance mandates, too much compliance. People are overwhelmed with it. And a lot of these compliance mandates overlap and self-contradict. So if you're in compliance to one thing, you're out of compliance to another thing. There's just too many of them. And so CISOs pretty much just do paperwork, and they aren't focused on the real deal, stop data breaches kind of mentality that they need to. So if you're doing compliance, these kind of checklists, that's not a strategy, that's a tactic. And then we have best of breed. These are things measured in Forrester waves and Gartner Magic Quadrants. And I refused to do waves when I was at Forrester because I think cybersecurity should be thought as a system, not as a collection of independent parts that don't talk to each other. So if you make technology decisions based upon waves and magic quadrants, all you're doing is creating more expense and depth for yourself. And then finally, I think most companies just use hope as their risk mitigation strategy. They hope nothing bad happens. They put their head in the sand, pretend like nothing's wrong. They obfuscate reality, pretend like it's not as bad as it is. They point the finger at somebody else. Oh, it's the intern. It's the so-and-so, right? You've seen that. That's almost a meme in our industry now. And finally, that leads to the employment journey. The CEO of Target was fired, the CEO of Equifax, the CEO of TalkTalk, and Ashley Madison, the head of OMB, all fired because of data breaches. So these are tactics, not strategies. So if we look at zero trust, this is the problem. What is trust? Well, that's a hard thing to define, and I could go into a long diatribe on it, but I won't, given the time that we have here today. But trust is, at its core, a human emotion that we have injected into digital systems for absolutely no reason. I can go back to 1984 when Ken Thompson won the Turing Award for co-creating Unix. And his speech was about the problem with trusting trust. All the way back in 1984, he discovers that this is a problem. So trust actually turns out to be a dangerous vulnerability. What do you do with vulnerabilities? Well, I hope you mitigate them. And so you must mitigate trust, because not only is it a dangerous vulnerability, it is the most dangerous one because it is the only vulnerability that is also an exploit at the same time. Think about that. Attackers don't need to create new code to exploit trust. All they need to do is get onto your network. And as a former penetration tester, I can tell you there are always ways they can get onto your network. So the only entity who gets value from trust in your organization are the malicious actors who are going to exploit it. Now, we look at this broken trust model where the untrusted side of the network went to the evil internet and the trusted side went to the internal network. But hey, we all know that malware can come across and get across this ephemeral trust boundary. Well, what's malware? Malware is a collection of packets which are made up of binary data, zeros and ones, being represented by electrons or photons. So if I can get my little electron, it's not much of a drawing of an electron today, but if I can get my little electron on your Cat6 cable on this side of it, you're going to elevate my privileges and give me attributes of trust? That makes no sense. And then we have malicious insiders, Snowden, Manning. They were trusted users on trusted networks. They had the right antivirus or endpoint protection. They had the right patch levels. They had robust identity management systems they were tied into. They had powerful multi-factor authentication systems, but no one looked at their packets post-authentication. This is why MFA is consumed by zero trust, but not equivalent to zero trust. So we have to get rid of this broken trust model. No more trusted users, no more trusted packets, no more trusted devices, no more trusted systems, no more trust at all. And it's not about implicit trust. Whoever came up with that idea totally misunderstood zero trust. Well, it's not implicit trust. We're going to give trust later. No, you're not. Trust is never good. Never, ever, ever in a digital system. Never, ever one time. Quit using the word if you're going to talk about zero trust. There's no implicit trust. There's no trust. There's zero trust. So people will then accuse me of saying that people aren't trustworthy. John, you're saying my people aren't trustworthy. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying something much more profound. I am saying people are not packets. No person has ever been on a network. It is the anthropomorphization of the network that's killing us, folks. The idea that John is on the network. Well, I'm not. I am not on the network right now. I am sitting in my house in Dallas, Texas, in the same chair I've been sitting in since COVID started. I have not shrunken down into a subatomic particle and sent via the public internet over to the Zoom server so I can appear on your screen right now. That rarely happens in the movies. Maybe Tron, Lawnmower Man. I've heard Wreck-It Ralph. I've never seen Wreck-It Ralph. I'm too old for that. But even in the Matrix, folks, they got to plug in. So people are not packets. We're not talking about the human world. We're talking about the digital world. And those are two completely different worlds, as much as some people want to conflate them. Now, zero trust, again, is very simple. I said there were only 9 things you need to know. Here's those first 4 design concepts. First, we focus on the business outcomes. What is the business trying to achieve? You know, we're thought of as the Department of No. That's what IT and security is. We're thought of as the Department of No. We need to be the Department of Secure Enablement. Yes, let me help you do that in a secure way. And the only way you're going to know that is by talking to the business leaders and finding out what they want to do. You know, I've done a lot of research on this when I was at Forrester about business alignment between IT and business leaders. And you know what? IT people want business leaders to come down to our level. Hey, you don't understand BGP and spanning tree. No, they don't, and they shouldn't. We need to come up to their level and worry about the things that business leaders care about. Things like, hey, increasing revenues, increasing profitability, stopping data breaches. Those are the 3 things that they care about, that they want IT to do for them. And then we next design from the inside out. We start with the data or assets and then design outward from there. This is a complete inversion of how we learned to design networks back in the day. We always started at the edge, whether that was the internet edge or the endpoint edge. And that is exactly the wrong place to start thinking about it, because we never get to the point of designing around the stuff we need to protect. The stuff you need to protect isn't at the edge, it's at the center. Always at the center. Always at the center. Because in a protection scheme, the center is the thing being protected, and the edges are the things that are peripheral to that. And then we determine who or what needs to have access, need to know, least privilege, right? And it must be enforced. We've had this concept of least privilege. I hear all the time, John, this is nothing new. We've had the concept of least privilege. Yeah, but you didn't enforce it, did you? And you didn't have it in a strategic framework, right? You take out any of the individual items in zero trust. They've been around. They're just put together in a strategic way, in a new way to think about this that inverts the old 20th century paradigms. And then we inspect and log all traffic all the way up to layer 7. You see, Eddie Snowden, there was no doubt of his identity on CyberNet, the network that he compromised and stole things from and gave to WikiLeaks. But no one was looking at the packets. No one was monitoring the activity. And so that's how Eddie Snowden was allowed to walk away with all that stuff that he stole. And it was a massive, massive amount of stuff. And it was a very dangerous thing for our society. So ultimately, zero trust is instantiated in layer 7 policy. I just need layer 7 controls to enforce that policy, but we're just trying to get to a policy statement. That's the key thing to take away from here. Now, The best way I can show you how this works is to show you how the U.S. Secret Service protects the president in the United States. So there are three things that the Secret Service knows about the president of the United States that we don't know about the data or assets that we're protecting. First, they know who the president is. They don't do presidential discovery projects. They don't scan for the president, do they? Second, they know where the president is at all times. And third, they know who should have access to the president at any given time. Now, yes, they did have a perimeter on this day. This is from President Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration parade. It was January 20th, 2009. They had a perimeter. But let's look at this uniformed Secret Service agent right here. He has his hands in his pockets. He has a hat on. Looks like his coat is buttoned. Why? Because he's not going to be doing any real protection. He's there as security theater to knock down the low-hanging fruit, to contain the crowds. No, the real protection is being done down here at the bottom of the screen at what I call the protect surface. The protect surface is the fundamental tactical concept in zero trust. So you want to shrink the attack surface down orders of magnitude to something very, very small and easily known, and that's called a protect surface. So on this day, in 2009, there are only 4 people in the protect surface: the president, his wife, and his 2 children. By the way, the vehicle is not the protect surface. It's merely transport. So sometimes these people are in Air Force One. Sometimes they're in Marine One, the helicopter. Sometimes they're walking a rope line. They are always the protect surface. So by understanding the protect surface, now you can change the game. And the Secret Service are going to do that. Watch closely, okay? Look at what they're doing. They're moving their controls in adjacent to the thing they're trying to protect. You see, we don't do that in cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, our controls are out here on the perimeter or on an endpoint, which are as far away as we can possibly get them from the thing that we're protecting. And this creates a secondary attack surface called our network. This is why we have terms like dwell time. We know about dwell time. What is dwell time? Dwell time is how much time they spend here in no man's land before they're detected, and they're not typically detected by the party who's being breached. They're typically detected days, months, weeks, sometimes even years by an independent third party. So we need to get rid of that idea of dwell time. And we do that by moving our controls adjacent to the protect surface so that we can create a micro perimeter in policy, right? So that's what we're trying to do. Micro perimeters protect surfaces. So micro perimeters, because the protect surface is so small, have a very small policy size as well. So there are only 2 individuals at this moment who can transit outbound of the micro perimeter. And there are 0 people who can run in from the street and get inside the micro perimeter. Let's look at the Secret Service agent at the bottom of the screen, shall we? He doesn't have his hands in his pockets. He does not have a hat on. His coat isn't buttoned. Why? Is it warmer down here? No, it's not. But he's the real deal in terms of protection. And he has a layer 6-7 control underneath his jacket where he's going to enforce that policy statement. Now, the Secret Service doesn't stop there. They continue to monitor and update in real time. So they might look out and see something out here. Oh, that looks a little sketchy. Somebody with a big bag. Let's tell these folks to keep an eye out, a little threat intelligence maybe, or they can get a message that says, hey, we need to change the policy and allow some important person to come inside. So those are the things that they're going to do. So this is zero trust in action. Now we get into the tools and techniques. So you're going to start your zero trust journey with the first step. These are the Fleury stairs in Lysenfjord, Norway. I took this photograph. This is a carved out mountain where in the early 1900s, people used to carry concrete blocks and big heavy things up to build a hydroelectric plant inside this mountain. And this is the world's longest staircase, 4,444 steps. And I was thinking as I was looking down there, how do you do that? How do you put a 50 kilogram bag of concrete on your back and walk up 4,444 steps every day? And the answer is you don't. You just start with the first step. You do it one step at a time, and you don't think about the steps up here. So start here, go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you will begin your journey. So the 5-step methodology guides your zero trust journey. You need to learn and memorize this if you want to really deploy zero trust environments. So the first thing we're going to do is define the protect surface. What do we need to protect? Fundamental question. And the answer is we protect DAS elements. This is an acronym I created to help you easily remember what needs to be protected. Data, applications, assets, or services. You take sensitive data, sensitive applications, whatever you have that's sensitive, but you take a single one of these and you put it into a single protect surface, and you build out your zero trust environment, one protect surface at a time. And once you've figured that out, you're going to pick a protect surface. We're going to do PCI as our data type today for credit card data. So that's going to go into our protect surface. And so now we need to map the transaction flows. How does that PCI system work as a system? Now, I put this in here. This comes from real world work. These are the 5 things that were common among every zero trust environment I designed at the beginning. And it's worked that way since then. But the reason I have step 2 in there is it's easy to break systems, because you're going to go into places where you don't know how it works, and there's nobody at the organization who was around when it was put in. So you have to understand how that works. And we're seeing more requirements for transaction flow mapping. I know that in some of the banking regulations, they want to see transaction flows from the banking systems. So map the transaction flows. After that, you will then create the architecture. I can't give you a real reference architecture for zero trust because it is 100% dependent upon the protect surface. Every zero trust environment should be tailor-made for the protect surface that it's protecting. Once you've architected that, then you will create policy around it, and we'll talk about that in more detail. And then finally, you monitor and maintain. And what this does is this: you take all of the telemetry that you can get your hands on and re-inject it back into the system so that the system gets stronger and stronger and stronger over time because you know more about the system. This is a term called anti-fragility. So what I'm doing is giving you an anti-fragile network. You should read the book, Fragile. It's hard to sometimes spell when you're writing on your screen. Anti-fragile by Taleb. He gave me the vocabulary to talk about what I've been wanting to do. So when there are stressors, attacks, you can make a system get stronger and stronger, and that's what anti-fragility is about. So you can make systems, cybersecurity systems that are anti-fragile, and that is an amazing thing to go out and do for your organization. Now, zero trust design defines the proper way to do segmentation. I often start these journeys because someone said, well, we need to segment our network. Oh, why are you segmenting your network? Well, the auditors said we must segment. No, that's the compelling event that's going to force you to segment. But that is not the reason you segment. The only reason to segment is to protect something. So you want to know why you're segmenting? Zero trust gives you the answer. You're protecting credit card data, PCI, that's your DAS element. So this is your cardholder data environment, and this determines the protect surface. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to connect a segmentation gateway, a gateway designed to segment networks layers 2 through 7 based upon users, applications, or data, to the protect surface to define a micro perimeter layer 7 policy so you can show how you are enforcing that segmentation. Segmentation gateway is any technology that has some sort of layer 7 next generation firewall capability in it. So we can say that we can have physical segmentation gateways for on-premise environments, and yeah, there are a lot of those still, and virtual segmentation gateways for virtual environments. But we still need to have that functionality in here up at layer 7. And so once we've done that, now we connect our management console to that, and this is the reference architecture for zero trust. It's this simple. You just now build this out incrementally. and iteratively, one protect surface at a time so that you don't disrupt your environment. That's how simple it is. Oftentimes people say, it's that simple. Yeah, it's that simple. Because I've been spending years trying to make the system simple. Complexity is the enemy of security. Simplicity is its friend. Now we get into the operations, the platforms, and the policies. There's a movie, and I mentioned a few movies already, and I often use movies in my presentation. There's a movie called The Imitation Game, and if you haven't seen it, you need to go stream it right now when you get home. Not right now. Sorry, Kim. Don't do it right now. Do it when you get home today. But it's about breaking the Nazi Enigma code. A man named Alan Turing, who is the father of modern computing, built this analog computer called the Bomba at Bletchley Park to automate the breaking of the Nazi Enigma code. And in the movie, the character of Alan Turing said something that was so profound to me that I put it in every single presentation. He said, "What if only a machine can defeat another machine?" Yeah, that's the world we live in, because our adversaries are highly automated, more automated than we are. Our adversaries don't have change control. Think about that. Hackers don't have change control. That gives them a huge advantage. So we need to move towards automation and orchestration and machine learning and all those buzzwords, but they're real. I know it because I do it every day. That's why I work it onto it, because we automate that process. And that's why I came over, because I wanted to be able to deliver zero trust as a service to my customers. And so the way you interact with the machine is by creating policy. So I developed in 2016 the Kipling method of zero trust rule writing. And so I call it the Kipling method because he's the person who gave us the idea of who, what, when, where, why, and how in a poem in 1902. And it's my personal homage to him, but also it's easier to say than the who, what, when, where, why, and how policy. And every culture, every language system that I've been to all over the world has this concept of who, what, when, where, why, and how, so we can understand it. So we can leverage it to create policies, whether they're in the cloud or on premise. So let's look at one. This is a policy for Salesforce, right? So Salesforce is the what statement. By what application should somebody be allowed to access a resource? So this is a layer 7 instantiation of the Salesforce application. It goes beyond port and protocol. And any attacker can get past port-based controls. So we need to be up at layer 7, and this is typically called application identifiers. And so we're going to define that. And then we're going to say who should be able to use that, right? And we're going to create a special group called sales. So that's the OUs of sales people, sales managers, sales admins. And then we're going to add some kind of authentication type to it. You see, all the people who are saying identity and authentication is zero trust, they're just over here focusing on the who statement. We've got a lot more to go. And then we could have time of day limitations. We could have when statements, and we should have just-in-time rules, JIT, that only turn on when the user needs them. And then we need, of course, to know where is the resource located. So in this case, we're going to say it's in the US version of Salesforce. And then we can have some why statements. We can have metadata around data classification. I call that data identity. We aren't doing very much of that now, but we should. And then finally, the how statement. How or by what criteria should we allow this to happen? So we can create a special policy field called content ID, where we say, what do we need to turn on? Well, we don't need URL filtering, because even though Salesforce traverses the public internet, it doesn't surf the public internet. But we will need to decrypt that traffic, super important. We'll need to turn on some IPS type of functionality. We'll need to have some sandboxing. And I worked for 4 years at Palo Alto, so these are Palo Alto terminology, but translate them to your own technology. And then you're probably going to need some DLP as well, given the sensitive nature of this. So if all these things are true, then we allow it. Zero trust is a collection of granular allow rules. And this is really important to understand. We've used very few deny rules in here, but focus on the allow rules, because all bad things happen inside of an allow rule. I often see security operations people go, oh, we just denied something. Let's investigate it. No, if you denied it, it didn't happen. So give yourself a high five and look at the allow rules. Everything bad happens because you allowed it to happen inside of an allow rule. So this works in the cloud, on premise. They're easy to write, easy to read, easy to understand, and easy to audit. Auditors love being able to have policy translated in this fashion for them. So that's what I'm doing for my job. We've created a managed service around this. So I do that every single day. So you can go and you can look at onto it and see that. But we're delivering Zero Trust as a service. I know maybe I can be accused of jumping on the buzzword bandwagon a little bit, but I really wanted to deliver this much more as a service because I want it to be consumable for everybody. What is the future of Zero Trust? The future of Zero Trust is more and more people adopt it and consume it and use it and get protected by it. That is the future of Zero Trust. So I want to leave you with this last thought around the learning curve. So I want you to think about, oh, man, this sounds hard to do, but it's not, because John says it's not. And the reason is because you can do it incrementally, iteratively, and non-disruptively. So we look at the sensitivity or criticality of each protect surface over the time on the Zero Trust journey, and this creates what I call the Zero Trust learning curve. And so we're going to look at everything from a protect surface perspective. And remember, each protect surface contains a single DAS element, right? A single DAS element. So early on, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on low sensitivity resources called learning protect surfaces. So these are things that if you make a mistake, no big deal, start over. Everybody needs a safe place to fail because you can't do this until you learn how to do it. And then you should practice it on some stuff that's a little bit more sensitive, but not mission critical. You get to Carnegie Hall the same way you get to Zero Trust the same way you get to Carnegie Hall. You practice. Screwed up that, but still got to give a shout out to my friend Tony Scott, former CIO of the U.S. federal government, who gave me that little nugget. And then we focus on the crown jewels. I used to say start with the crown jewels, but then I realized that too many people did not know how those crown jewels worked. But luckily, this is early on in your Zero Trust journey. And so now you can then deploy things over time in different ways, things that aren't quite as important. And you can actually say at any time, the things below this level aren't important at all. And then the other thing you can use with this learning curve is you can do project management around it. You can say, this first one is going to take us 30 days. This one is 60 days. This one here is 1 year, right? So you can start aligning time frames to any particular protect surface, which is how you should do it. And then you can say, oh, this is $1, this is $2, and this is a $3 one, right? So you can assign budget to it. So this helps with managing it from a project standpoint. So, last thing, the Zero Trust maturity model, right? These 5 steps here. Look at the 5 steps. That's how you're going to discover how good you're doing. So we're going to have a traditional 5-level CMM model, and we're going to say, what is our protect surface? Our protect surface is the cardholder data environment, and the DAS element is PCI. Now we know a whole lot about what's going on, and we say, we've kind of defined what it is, but we haven't mapped the transaction flows. We're just at the beginning of that. We have no policy, and of course, we don't monitor and maintain. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're at a score of 6. We want to get over here in X amount of time on this one protect surface so that we can have a score of 20 in, say, 90 days. And that's how you do it. That's how you measure how well you're doing. Do it on a per protect surface basis. Okay. From the Opm Data Breach report, they came out and they said Zero Trust would have profoundly limited the attacker's ability to move within Oppm's network and access such sensitive data. This is why it's the world's only cybersecurity strategy, because a sitting congressman could say that and write that in a byline article. So this is the key thing. We're focusing on strategy, and then there's a tactical way to do that, but they're decoupled because the technology is going to change, but the strategy doesn't have to. So at this point, I'm going to open up my chat window and answer some questions that have come in for people, but I'm going to take a sip of coffee here first, real quick, if you don't mind. Okay, please compare the two principles, least privilege and zero trust. Well, least privilege is a concept within the who statement or the identity portion of zero trust. Zero trust is a strategy. Somebody asks, good stuff. Will there be a deck available? I believe so, but we'll ask Kim and everyone. Any other questions coming in